Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first Cabinet meeting after recess. It's so nice to see everybody's here and eager to get started. So what we will do is we will first and foremost ask for declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary and prejudicial interests. Members, do you have any? No, thank you very much. And item number 2 is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting of the Cabinet held on the 29th of July and the 6th of August. Yeah, thank you very much. And item number 3 is to receive the minutes of overview and scrutiny committees and subcommittees. We've got health, care and wellbeing. Thank you. Children and young people, Councillor, thank you. Overview, management and scrutiny. Yep, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to item number 4, which is the adults unpaid carers strategy. And I believe I'm handing over to you, Liz. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Liz Hardy-Cork. I'm Head of Services for Early Intervention and Localities in Adult Social Care. And we're bringing the Adults Carers Strategy 2025 to 2030 this morning and recommending for approval the strategy, which is replacing our 2019 to 2024 version. I have brought a few slides just to give you a very brief overview of what's covered both in the Cabinet report and also in the strategy, which you'll all have had sight of. And then any questions can be taken afterwards. So first slide, please. So just to explain the purpose of the strategy, basically it's to outline our vision, priorities and commitments to supporting unpaid adult carers. And this is something we have a long history of in adult social care in the East Riding of working with our unpaid carers. So this document really brings up to date what we've been doing for many years. It allows carers to have a voice in what doesn't work for them and what may or may not work in practice. And it brings together our partners and stakeholders to support carers in the best way we can across the health and the social care system. Next slide, please. So in terms of our vision, it's to ensure every carer receives individualised support and helps them to achieve and sustain a healthy balance between their caregiving duties and personal well-being. And underneath there is the Carers UK definition of a carer. And we're very mindful that the people who we see as unpaid carers in adult social care often define themselves as just looking after someone. It's just an extension of their family responsibilities. So next slide, sorry, Sam. Because carers are absolutely at the heart, the core of everything that we're doing within adult social care, it was really important for us to have the voice of the carer all the way through the strategy. And it reached out not just to unpaid carers that we do know and do work with, but also to all residents across the East Riding footprint. So we used a number of means to do so, which you can see highlighted there. We took advantage of social media. We had colleagues going on local radio. We used our carers newsletter. We looked at focus groups. So we invited people to focus groups. But if people couldn't do that or weren't comfortable with it, or it was difficult with their caring responsibilities, we had individual phone calls with them. We had email correspondence. And we engaged with lots of the established groups that we have across the East Riding, because across the whole county, there are a number of groups where informal carers meet and share experiences. And of course, we used our long-standing relationship with the Carers Advisory Group, who have been a key part of helping us pull together this strategy to make sure the carer's voice was reflected within that. And by engaging with all of these groups, we boiled this down to a number of informed priorities, which are throughout this strategy. We then took those to other forums to make sure that it was right, it was reflecting the voice of the carers, and we used some of our internal council groups. For example, we have a carers forum, we have an EDI forum, we have the LGBT plus community forum, and again, carers group. So again, we were feeding back, engaging, having those conversations. Next slide, please. And this is what carers told us from all the feedback we had. These are the 5 key priorities for our unpaid carers in East Riding: to remain mentally and physically well, to have access to information and support, life outside of caring roles, really important to people who are carers, and it's personalised and coordinated support, and that they can identify as a carer and this contribution is recognised. So really important, and this is coming from the words of the carers, it's not something that we've put onto our caring community. So that was the backbone of our carers strategy. We do have our governance arrangements in place, and the Carers Advisory Group have very helpfully agreed to monitor how we're doing against those priorities. We will be updating and bringing it to the appropriate forums to make sure people can see how that's working. And we're also mindful that we do need to look at the user groups that we work with and to get their views on this, because now we've had this produced, it's not just a case of removing it and then it's CAG and the council. So we'll be working to look at how best to do that over the next 5 years. And that, in summary, is where we've got to. So open to any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Liz. A huge amount of work has clearly gone into this. So I'm going to hand over to Councillor Owen, the portfolio holder.
Thanks very much indeed, Leader, and thanks, Liz, for presenting there. I think it's important that we just reflect a little bit on what caring is all about, because we do talk about a whole range of things. Bearing in mind this is an adult strategy, and I'm sure Councillor Aitken will be touching on the children's side of this and the interface between the two. But of course, we talk about people with a whole range of things. That could be a long-term illness, can be a disability, could be a mental health challenge, could be an addiction, and particularly age-related needs that people need caring for. And who are these people? They can be parents, elderly relatives, partners, spouses, children, as we said before, with special needs, or just friends and neighbours. As Liz mentioned, most people don't see themselves as caring. It's something they do for either family or friends. We know the majority, or just slightly the majority, tends to be women, and it tends to be older women that are carers in the national market. And I think it's worth reflecting on the national picture, where there are probably between 4 and 5 million unpaid carers in the UK. And particularly, most of them tend to be middle-aged adults and often balancing work and family responsibilities. Certainly, on a national scale, and we're just a microcosm of what happens nationally, no way could any of our systems, be it through healthcare, mental health, local government, education, support everybody if they needed that support. And for example, in the East Riding, we believe we have maybe between 3,500 and 4,000 registered carers that we know about. And there's probably another 30 to 40,000 people out there that, again, don't consider themselves as carers. And if they suddenly found with an aging population they needed a lot more support, then we would really be stuck, both nationally and locally. Now, I think, as Liz mentioned earlier, it's all about intervention and prevention. And what we try and do is support as many people to support themselves moving forward. This is what this strategy is all about. So we have a very active and a very professional carers advisory group that I've had pleasure over the many years in various portfolios to dip in and out of and back in again now, who are very professional, they're very pragmatic, and they bring that voice of lived experience to things. You know, they're not asking for handouts or anything, they're just asking for advice and respite and help and guidance, which I think was in that list of priorities. You know, it's help and advice and a steer sometimes is what people are looking for. We have, I think, 8 carer support groups, quite well geographically located. And again, the experience I've had personally of those is they're, again, very self-sufficient, and they are good at looking after each other rather than looking for handouts from anybody else. So I think all in all, the the strategy is just how we can bring people together, how we can help them in their caring role, and continue to do that moving forward. And as Liz said, we've been doing for many years quite successfully. And this is just recognising the change both in the demographics and the need and the demand moving forward to help where we can, because without that help and intervention from ourselves, helping prevent people get worse, I think we really would be struggling in the future. So I welcome this strategy. It has been well thought through. I know a lot of effort, particularly from the Carers Advisory Group, and from the meetings I've sat in where they feed forward. In fact, they'd rather have delayed this to get everything right than just rush ahead with something that comes forward. So fully support this and happy to recommend it to Cabinet moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Owen. Can I now bring in Councillor Aitken, please?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Leader. And thank you, Councillor Owen. I'm likewise very much in support of the strategy. I think it's a good piece of work and hugely important. But as you've already alluded to, Councillor Owen, obviously this is also a challenge for children across the East Riding. And I am conscious that in Children's Services, we are at the moment looking at a strategy for child carers. But I think it is imperative that we link that and that we work together across children's and adults so that we can make sure that we are not missing out or losing any potential identification of young carers. And just to give you some stats, apparently at the moment we are estimating about 547 children aged 5 to 17 are identified as young carers in the East Riding. But a really frightening statistic is that a national estimate is that there are 800,000 young carers estimated to be in the UK, and only 120,000 are identified in the census, which suggests that 85% of young carers are unidentified. Now, if we put that 85% statistic into our numbers here, then we are missing a lot of young carers, and the more work and the more publicity we can give to this is really important. And many are unidentified because they don't realise that they're carers and that they are just doing it because they love and care for their family. And they're also very frightened of family separation. So we have to do a bit of myth busting to say that the local authority are here to support these young children and not to break families up. We never look to break a family up. We always just want to support to make it a better environment for both the parents, family and the children. And adults are often unaware or reluctant to report it, again, for those fears of not really understanding what it means and how we can help and support these youngsters. So fully support this as a strategy in itself, but I really do want to see it weaved together so that we're covering both children's and adults in the future.
Thank you very much, Councillor Aitken. Did you want to come in, Liz?
No, I was just going to say thank you, Councillor Aitken, for that. In terms of some of the early work we're already starting in the Carers Support Service, the team are having those links with Children's Services already, particularly looking at those children or young people who are 16, 17 and moving towards adult, because they're our adult carers who this will impact on. So we're already building those links and developing, but absolutely the visibility of carers is really important, and certainly within adult social care, where we're working with an adult who may have a disability and care and support needs, if we identify there's a young person there, we'll be linking in with Children's Services with regards to that. But it's a really interesting statistic that you're describing, because it's throughout the life course, isn't it, for many of these young people? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can now bring in Councillor Healing, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got no hesitation whatsoever in supporting this strategy. It's an excellent piece of work. Well done to you and your team. Just one very small question. It's been mentioned by Victoria, but for children, how do we reach out to those carers who are struggling alone and feel it is their personal responsibility to look after a loved one? How are we trying to reach them? Can you clarify that a little bit for me?
At the moment, the Carer Support Service, as Councillor Owen has referred to, we work with around 4,000. We know of 4,000 carers in the East Riding, but the last census did tell us there's 40,000-ish carers out there, which is a huge difference. We couldn't cope with all of those carers coming to the Carer Support Service tomorrow. However, in terms of raising that awareness, we do reach out within our media. We put things on social media. We have open days at the Carer Support Service. So very recently for Carers Week, we had a number of events across East Riding using our leisure centres and using the Carer Support Service. And it was a lovely sunny day and people were just walking down Cross Street and popped in. We're having conversations for the first time about their carers role. So we try and encourage that visibility. We have presence with different teams across the East Riding in terms of adult social care. So if we're picking up issues of caring there, it might come in through a different route to the council as well. So there are a number of ways that we can start having those conversations. And of course, we have that legal framework in terms of assessing carers if they become known to us. So if we're working with somebody that maybe's come through the hospital route and we identify that there's a caring situation there and people are struggling, our social care staff would be having those conversations. So there are a number of ways that people become known to us or we can share that. And also there are organisations there in our voluntary sector who reach out to carers as well, which are a key partner because lots of people don't want to come to adult social care or the council. They would rather look at different means of support. So our voluntary sector partners are really key within this. So I guess what I'm saying is there's no one quick fix or one easy answer. It's about just pushing that message out there. And once this gets signed off, this will be another means to share that. We can kind of flag that in different arenas. So people might just see that in the East Riding newsletter that comes out to all our residents. So, and obviously yourselves can, as you come across constituents, can speak to them about carers support. So yes, it's a very large and ongoing piece of work.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. That's really reassuring. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'll bring in Councillor Tucker, then I've got Councillor Jefferson.
Thank you, Leader. I want to start by paying tribute to you and the team because this is an amazing piece of work. And like Councillor Owen said earlier, I've been very fortunate in my previous role as portfolio holder for health and social care, seeing the impacts of this strategy out there in real. I was humbled a couple of years ago when I was invited to speak at a conference from paid carers at Ticton. And the overriding theme that came from the people attending that conference was knowing they had a safety net. They didn't want the formalised care, but just having that person they could speak to, or that knowing there's somebody there in the darkest hours was the most overriding sort of need really of the people. And I think we need to pay tribute to it's an army of unpaid carers out there that are caring for loved ones, maybe the grandparents, maybe the parents, maybe the wife, maybe the husband, maybe the children. And I think the strategy puts a framework in for those people doing that. So I thank you for work that you and your team have done. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll certainly pass that back to the service.
Thank you, Councillor Tucker. Councillor Jefferson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Obviously, I go along with everything that's been said here already, and congratulations. I think this is really, really well done. And obviously, reading through it, there's an awful lot to do between now and 2030. I was looking on page, it's page 15 of 21, and down at the bottom it's 41, so it's very confusing when you're trying to look at an agenda. But I just wondered on the second bullet point where it says training delivered to key services, etc. Obviously, community wellbeing teams, community mental health teams. And then you've got GP practices regarding the carer offer and how to identify hidden carers. How do you train doctors in GP surgeries? Because they're very, very busy. And I wondered, do you have certain times to bring them all together, or do you just send out information to them?
Thank you. We have had the opportunity to go to GP protected time for learning sessions where we would go to the surgeries or a group of doctors themselves and have the opportunity. It is very difficult because their time is extremely precious, but we have managed to do that and have links with local practices as well. In terms of the training, we've been out to a number of awareness raising sessions to a number of different forums, including farming communities who might not recognise caring roles there, and they're often one of our sort of hidden communities. We've worked closely with travellers workers within the council to reach into travelling communities who may not be familiar with the caring role in the way that we would perhaps see it through this strategy. So sometimes it's a formal training session, sometimes it's a presentation, sometimes it could be just building those links to have the networks and connections. So if people do have questions, then they can do that. And of course, if people in the community wellbeing teams are aware of what they need to be doing in terms of having those conversations, each interaction they have with professionals, it's an in-reach there as well. So it's just getting that message out through training opportunities, but through those networks that's so important.
Thank you very, very much. You've answered that really well. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I've got Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for the report. It's very interesting, the misconception that some people have, a large proportion of people have with regard to this. The questions that I've been asked, and quite rightly when I was having them asked to me, was, well, in the past, it was when someone has a problem, it was what can the family do? And now it seems to be what can the council or what can the state do? Well, that's not true. What you're saying here is that we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who are actually still caring for families. And the fact that we're able to facilitate that and assist them to continue to do that properly is wonderful. It is really difficult. I went through the same situation many years ago when my mother got cancer and I had to look after her and run a job and run my own family. And it was extremely difficult because I didn't know how to do it. And I'm sure I made horrendous mistakes just to make sure that my mother got what she needed to do. And to have had someone who could give me emotional support when things were not going what I was expected, or practical tasks, just looking after her. Your medical assistance, as you mentioned here, and advocacy would have been wonderful if we'd have had it then. So to see you do that now is wonderful. If I may just ask a question of you, though, is that we talk about they're able to have an allowance if they do at least 35 hours, which is, a substantial amount of time if they're in full-time employment. And I know they can only earn up to £151 a week. But £83.50, £83.30, sorry, for 35 hours works out at £2.38 an hour. Isn't a fantastic amount to actually help people very much? And I wonder, how do you feel about that? Could we do more? Not necessarily as a council, but maybe to lobby people to do better, to help these people who, after all, if they weren't there, it would fall on us as authority to do something.
Thank you for your comments and sharing your experience. In terms of the rates that are set, that would be through the DWP and, like you said, lobbying government to raise the profile of our unpaid carers. Within the council, we're always looking at different ways of supporting our unpaid carers within the means that we have as well. And we do so using a number of means in terms of we work with Carers UK, so we have a platform where there's information and support there. It's not a monetary remuneration for what people have to do, but it's just another form of support that often is practical. And I know David Howarth, who's our chair of the Carers Advisory Group, he's very keen on providing information and looking at developing almost like a handbook for carers to help them navigate through things like the benefits that you're talking about and other access to resources, financial situations, what that might mean in terms of linking into respite for carers. So there are a number of means of doing so. It doesn't sound a lot of money. I couldn't possibly comment on how we could improve that, but certainly from a council perspective, we're always looking to explore ways of offering that support. And I think having the strategy and carers having a voice within that and seeing how we're doing and challenging back if it's not working for them will help us improve our offer.
Thank you very much. You'll be pleased to know that's all the questions, but I'm quite sure we have no issues with Cabinet approving these recommendations. And please thank your team very much, because it's a fantastic strategy and it's heartening to know that we are there. We do look after our carers and we're always willing to do more. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you for coming. Oh. Okay, so we'll now go on to item number 5, which is the Treasury Management Annual Report 24-25. And I believe we have got Mark Buckton with us to take us through it. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Mark Buckton, the Principal Accountant who's responsible for the Treasury Management function. And this report is an assurance report on the Treasury Management activities between April 24 and March 25. And it covers how the function performed against its objectives, which are set out in the Treasury Management Policy and Treasury Management Strategies. The report has already been presented to the Audit Committee and there were no changes to the report. First of all, I'd just like to highlight that all activities were carried out in accordance with the policy and strategy during that period. And if I can bring your attention to section 2.1, it's probably worth just reminding everyone what Treasury Management is, seeing as that it's not always in the forefront of your mind. So the policy statement defines Treasury Management as the management of the Council's investments and cash flows, its banking, money market and capital transactions. So by that, you think borrowing, and then the effective control of the risks associated with those activities. The council has significant cash balances for various reasons. It can be that we're holding money in reserves to spend on capital projects. It can be we've received grants in advance. It can be the profile of the way we receive council tax or business rates that mean that we haven't always spent it, so we have to invest it in the interim. And the Treasury Management Strategy sets out some main objectives. So in terms of investments, we focus on maintaining the capital security, so we don't want to lose the cash at any point. We also need to then look at liquidity, make sure that we have the cash available when we want to spend it. And then within those constraints, the final sort of target is to maximise our returns. With the borrowing strategy, it's always to minimise the cost of the revenue debt and make sure that we minimise the impact of volatility because of changes to interest rates. In terms of risk and performance, we would monitor what's going on in the financial markets and what's going on in the economy to determine how we should approach our strategy and policy. So section 3 covers the main economic conditions that would have influenced our approach to Treasury Management during the year. So inflation dropped back to the bank's 2% target in May 24, and that allowed the bank in August to cut interest rates by 0.25%, and then the interest rate continued the inflation rate continued to sort of vary around the 2% to 3% level, and the economy was performing relatively strongly compared to peers, and that allowed them to make 2 further cuts. So there were 0.75% of cuts during the year. The economy grew at 1.8% and had only really faltered in the final quarter of 2024 with a bit of weaker growth in that period. So that was what was influencing really the short-term interest rate levels that determine what we return on investments. In terms of the longer-term interest rates, they're dictated really by the gilt yields, government borrowing costs, and they were influenced heavily during the year by the need to, or the outlook for more borrowing and a weaker economic outlook, and that prompted investors to want higher returns from gilts. So it pushed up the longer term rates, which increased potentially our borrowing costs. So that really sort of sets out the outlook. One sort of thing that has happened with that is that normally short-term interest rates have a knock-on effect through on long-term interest rates, and that's been weakened because of the gilt investors focusing more on the outlook for the long-term UK government borrowing, and also the Bank of England has been reducing its stock of gilts, and as a result of that, it's put more pressure on the prices of gilts because there's more gilts in the market. So that's the kind of economic context we've been working within. If I move on to section 4, covering the investments, the capital security was maintained adhering to the counterparty framework that we have and the limits we have within the Treasury policy. On page 54, Appendix A, that sort of highlights the structure of the investments that we had at the year end compared to the previous year, and the various regions and types of investments that we held. If we look at Appendix B on the following page 55, that illustrates the maximum level we held in investments with individual institutions and the limit within the policy. So we've adhered to all of those limits. If we move on to later in section 4, 4.6, during the year, local authority demand for loans increased, and we were able to take advantage of that by lending to other local authorities, and we were able to essentially get a premium over what we would have got in the banking sector in terms of investing with there instead. We made one long-term loan over for a 5-year period to the Humber NHS Foundation Trust for 1.2 million, and that was at a rate of 5.5%, so it was competitive. And for the full year, investment turnover was 993 million. So that's the kind of level of cash balances that we're working with when we're making these investments. We have a target overnight of plus or minus £100,000 left in the bank account, and that's to ensure that we utilise and invest in all the available funds. We met that on 78% of the occasions, which was slightly below the 80% target, which is set in the strategy. Ultimately, the main reason is intraday income that's received now with the new online banking and same-day payments. And subsequently, we've revised the Treasury strategy this year to allow for a slightly increased balance of 150,000 overnight to sort of reflect this change in technology. So at 4.11, it summarises the investment activities and what we've achieved, and the average rate of investment was 5.1%, which is very competitive compared to the bank rate of 5.25, which then dropped to 4.5%. So we've done well based on where market rates were, and that's £2 million higher than the budget was set originally. In terms of borrowing, we didn't need to borrow to finance our cash flow, and in terms of longer term borrowing, we didn't need to borrow either because the cash balances remained higher than we'd originally anticipated. The borrowing that was outstanding at the 31st, or its borrowing requirement outstanding at the 31st of March 25 was some 43.9 million. That's been temporarily met from our balances, and that's as a result of the demands that the capital programme has placed on us needing to borrow at some point in the future. And we'll be looking at when is the best time to externalise that borrowing. on page 56 at Appendix C, that summarises the current outstanding borrowing that we have in relation to the general fund and the HRA, and then it has a maturity profile as well to illustrate that there's no single year where we have a huge maturity that will put pressure on us and leave us at the mercy of the market interest rates. If we move on to section 7, the prudential indicators, these are indicators that we set in February, which determine or ensure the affordability of the capital programme. The actual figures are in the second column. If I can draw your attention firstly to the operational boundary of 488 million. So that's where we expected to be had we borrowed within the year, and that is a reasonable level of borrowing in relation to the demands of the capital programme. The authorised borrowing limit was the maximum level we could have borrowed that would have still been affordable, and our actual level is 391 million, so we're well within that, partially because we've deferred the borrowing. So that's covering the prudential indicators. And then the final section I'd like to cover is the control assurance section on page 9. So the internal audit section has reviewed the Treasury management function during the year and has provided substantial assurance that the operation is functioning effectively and within the constraints. So I basically draw your attention back to the recommendation on page 48, section D, which is that you note the assurance provided by the report. Thank you. Has anyone got any questions?
I think we might have actually, but thank you very much for that. I'm going to bring in Councillor Wilkinson as the portfolio holder and then Councillor Tucker.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the report. Excellent report. I think it gives everybody a good feel as to the amount of effort that's been put into ensuring that we have a Treasury management strategy that works well and is adhered to very carefully. And obviously, starting with our Section 151 officer and moving out towards people such as yourself and indeed me and the audit team and all the other people that are involved in that. Everybody scrutinises it very carefully and it comes out with this wonderful strategy that we have. I watched this grow from the pensions Treasury strategy, Treasury management strategy, the audit, all the way through the last decade and a half to see it come to where it is now. It's just, it really is a joy to see. And given my background in banking, believe me, I do criticise very quickly if I don't think it's right. I'm very pleased to see how we've strictly adhered to all the investment rules, etc., and that we've been very, very careful. We're very fortunate in this council to have been very prudent in the way in which we've borrowed and dealt with our funds, and that we've managed to keep cash balances through for many reasons because of the way in which the profile comes through for our funding. And that we've utilised those very carefully and very astutely to ensure that we don't need to borrow anything for large tracts of the time. And the amounts that we do borrow, we've been very careful to view interest rates as we move along. And I think that sometimes when we alter capital projects profiles, then that gives us an opportunity, therefore, to have large sums of money we weren't expecting for short periods of time. And it's been able to look at what the Treasury management figures are for and to ensure that we invest in areas that we're absolutely sure we're safe and comfortable, which we are. So I can only say that I'm really pleased about this and to thank everyone who's involved, right the way down to even councillors or sat on audit committee who have to wade through this and make sure that everything's right. So thank you for that and thank you for a very good report.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Tucker, please.
Thank you. And thank you, Mark, for a really good presentation. As portfolio holders, we all have different expertise in our own areas, and I will never, ever have the fiscal knowledge that Councillor Wilkinson has when it comes to finance. But for me, sitting in the role I'm doing at the moment, my big takeaways are in the executive summary, and I just want to, hopefully I've got this right. It says that All activity within statutory and council determined limits, so everything we did was where it should be. But some of the big tasks are the investment turnover amounted to 993 million. That's £1 billion. That is a huge amount of money. And a return of 5.10. Again, you know, in this market and this, I mean, I'm only getting 3% on my savings. So, and there was no cash deficits, and we've got no temporary borrowing. Was undertaken, again, commendable to say the least. But I'm really pleased to see the last bullet point that says no long-term borrowing was undertaken in the year. So I just commend you, Georgine, and the team. I think you've done an amazing job, and I feel very secure in the knowledge that we've got some really expert people in the background. So thank you very much for the report, and thank you, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Councillor Tucker. As usual, Mark, Councillor Tucker's stolen most of my words. But I do have to say, at the moment, the volatility that's around the country, and particularly with councils, it is so reassuring to sit in this chair as leader of this council with the cabinet, knowing that you and your team are absolutely on it and looking after us all, not just us, but our residents and the whole of East Riding. So sincerely, thank you for everything you do, and please take that back to all your staff who you work with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll pass it on.
Are we happy with the recommendation? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item number 6, and I'm going to hand over to Mr. Stevens. It's the forward plan of key decisions, Mr. Stevens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, this is the usual refresh of the forward plan that contains all the upcoming council key decisions, this time from September to February next year. The changes are set out, or the proposed changes, in Appendix 1, and you'll see 3 additional reports have been placed on the forward plan and 1 report that's changed the date that it's proposed to come to Cabinet. So other than that, the updated forward plan is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Are we happy to recommend that for approval, everyone? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that ends this part of the meeting. So in accordance with regulations quoted on the agenda front sheet, the Cabinet is asked to consider excluding the press and public from the meeting for consideration of the following items on the grounds that they are likely to involve the disclosure of exempt information as defined in the Local Government Act 1972. In making its decision, the Cabinet is asked to confirm that it is satisfied that in the public interest that maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Members, do you agree? Okay, so I can now declare this part of the meeting is closed. And just thank everybody who